Hello, hello, hello. This is so cool to be here. I'm Anne Wilson, the Welsh chef, and the amazing Nerina Visser.
Thank you, Anne. Lovely to be here and lovely to spend time with you once again and hopefully having a nice chat over what is currently lunchtime in some parts of the world. Maybe it's dinner in your part of the world, but lovely to be with you anyway.
Or breakfast for those of you in the US, just getting up. And so we're doing a special Q&A session today for you and for so many of our amazing PIMS clients. That's the Passive Investment Management Mastery School, together with Financial Freedom University peeps, because it's just been a hang of a lot of noise. There's been a lot of commentary. There's been a lot of questions going on of, what is going on in the world. There's so much change. There's so much political uncertainty. There's financial market uncertainty. There's crazy sort of junk status. What does that mean in terms of credit ratings in countries? And so we've both been getting a lot of questions individually as individuals together in the program. It was what better to come and have this fireside chat. Well, there's no fire here, but hey, this great Facebook Live to answer these questions. So what's great, you can also be putting your questions in the comment section below the video and they'll pop up. So we're going to spend the next, 15 minutes. I've got some juicy questions lined up for our resident expert in all things passive investing, the amazing Nerina. And to get these questions going, but ask yours as well, because I think it's so important that we are able to have conversations about these. And sometimes as women, it's really, and this is not for the amazing men listening, not to dismiss you, but I know for me, sometimes just airing my concerns and being able to speak about them and ask questions just helps me clear the fog, gets the bees out of the churning that can sometimes really create that paralysis and that sense of not knowing how to go. So great to see you joining and coming up here. So Cassandra, so lovely to see you. So let's start right off. Enough of me rabbiting on, Nerina. There's been a couple of big incidents. So just generally, when we're hearing all this noise going on, be it political uncertainty, be it new elections, be it Brexiting or trumpeting or Zoomering, what's your broad advice, just starting at a high level with what is going on when we sort of see what's going on in the media?
Take a deep breath. That's the first step. Just the second thing is don't panic. There's no need to panic. On my way here to Anne this morning, I was thinking about the fact that it's now coming up for a year. In June, it'll be a year since we had probably the first relatively major political shock in the world. Brexit. Remember that election?
Almost a year ago.
Exactly. Then we had the unexpected election of Donald Trump as president in November last year. In between all of that in South Africa, we've had local government elections. We've had this credit rating downgrade, this dreaded junk thing that everybody's talking about. We've seen in Brazil a president being impeached. We have seen in Europe all these elections going on. We've already had those in the Netherlands. We're in the phase with France in terms of their elections, and there's plenty more coming. China's got their 5-year Politburo elections that are going on, not to mention what's happening in Russia. The list can just go on and on. You can hear me almost getting all anxious just mentioning all these things.
Breathe.
Thank you. And I think what is so important in that, it tells me the level of noise around us. And our sources of news, Anne, is also so different nowadays than it's been forever. We are confronted with this on platforms and in communities that used to be our comfort, our safe spaces. Here on Facebook, for example,
that's such a good point.
We used to have that as places to interact with our loved ones, with our friends, to share fun, good things, and now we are being inundated with political, economic, and financial market noise, and I do refer to it as noise, because Anne and I was having a chat just before we came on air, and I think what stands out for me in terms of this is who's perpetuating that message? What is the type of message that is being perpetuated. And I realized, but you know what, they're not really talking to me. They're not talking to me as an investor, as a long-term investor. Who they are talking to, and I'm now specifically referring to the financial media, the mainstream media, they are really talking to short-term traders, people who are needing to look for information to make relatively short-term trading ideas, to try and capitalize on something that moves, whether that movement is a currency or whether it's an interest rate or whether it's a shock election result. These are all short-term things. And if we allow ourselves to be overwhelmed by this short-term noise, we lose track of what are we really about, what are we to do here, which is about having appropriate long-term investment strategies, managing our money in such a way that it serves us well.
So I really want to pick up on that because I think that's such a key point is, noticing one, this is noise and it's side, and absolutely, it's hard to know what should you filter, what's relevant, shouldn't you, and that's why we're here. We're going to go more specific into that. But this very point about that most of what you hear on the media isn't relevant to us.
Yeah.
And so maybe, I'd just like to just add here, there's a clear distinction between an investor versus a trader. Yeah. In Financial Freedom University, we go deeper in that as well as in PIMS. But a trader is somebody who's making short-term buy and sell decisions with the intention of making money from the buy and the sell.
Yes.
Okay. Very important. So a trader has a job.
Yeah,
their investment, well, they don't even invest. They have a job making money by buying and selling shares and different instruments on the stock market. An investor, that's me, Nerina, that's all of you. The people who are creating sustainable wealth, where they have assets that can earn money for them, that grow in value, that can give them income, that protect them, that provide this base. We're a completely different beast. Yeah. We're a hell of a lot more interesting, firstly, because we've got lives. We're not spending our time staring at the screen trying to go, what's happening with the price going up and down? We're understanding that our investments through the stock market, because we don't invest in the stock market, we invest through it. We are actually buying great quality companies that are still functioning, that are still working, that are still selling products, that are still giving value out there. Business is going on. That is what we're investing in. Yeah. And those investments are there to grow and trade. And the very fact that we invest in passive investment structures, these juicy things called index trackers, by doing that, we are actually building in a self-correcting mechanism.
Exactly.
So those businesses that are no longer giving value out in the world, that aren't growing, drop out of the index. So this is so important, this very, very first key message. So if you get this through, are you an investor or are you a trader? So maybe some of you want to be trading, but remember that's a job. That's not what we're about. We're about creating real wealth. And so that is really so important. So as you notice, you take that deep breath in, you go, I'm an investor. That 99.9% of this noise is relevant for people who've got a job trying to make money buying and selling. It's irrelevant to me, so I can let that go. So such a key thing.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing about why the index trackers and the way that we construct portfolios is so key to why we say you can afford to just step back and not panic. It's all about diversification. Okay. It's all about not just having a single investment in a single company or in a single market or in a single currency. It's all about having a little bit of a whole lot of stuff. And that's really what diversification is all about. You cannot expect every single component of your investment in a well-diversified portfolio to be going up every day. If it is, you are probably in a Ponzi scheme and the thing is going to collapse. You should expect exactly. You should expect some of your investments to perform less well at times. And it's that balancing factor, that zig and zag of the different components of your investment strategy that allows you to weather the storm. Think of a boat on a very uncertain and uneven and a turbulent sea. You really want that balancing fact that says, you know what, walking over, a rocky road, you really find your balance by testing out where you're putting your foot down and so on. So diversification is incredibly key. And when you have a well-constructed investment strategy, diversified, designed for the long term, designed to really suit your particular investment requirements. When you have that, you can afford to take the deep breath, step back, not panic, and say, you know what, I know that my portfolio is designed to weather all the storms, all types of storms over the longer term.
So we're talking about exactly, when you're talking about that investment strategy, is that design of that portfolio, of that absolutely. 4 or 5 index trackers that cover your core domestic market. So we're going to get to some specifics, and I've got a question to come back to you, actually a question from Sue Loughlin on that aspect around understanding different markets and different locations, because we've also got the geographic spec. You know, you've got your diversification around segments, but then that geographic, which covers that. So let's get some specifics. And we got a lot of South African investors. Yeah, I can see all of you here. So let's, you know what, at some point we're just going to have to talk about this. We now have a junk economy in South Africa. So what does it mean, Nerina?
So actually, I want to take a step back. And the first thing that I have a major problem with is even this word junk. And I'm glad that you just said we have a junk economy. I don't quite agree with that. It's close. But I think even worse for me is this idea of we are now junk. That, I think, is the worst thing we can do to ourselves, to look at something, and I'm going to explain to you what this so-called junk status actually means, where it comes from. But for us to actually take that onto ourselves and think less of ourselves because of some credit rating that was given to some investments. Right, so we are not junk. Most definitely not. I know Anne and I are not, and I know none of you are junk.
And for those of you who aren't South African, stay with us. We're going to spend just a few moments on this, because this is also very relevant when you're looking at your overall portfolio, because this whole issue of credit ratings, investment downgrades or upgrades is very relevant to investors, especially in the emerging markets. So, you know, you'll just learn a little bit here. It might not be affecting you right now, so thank you. We're not junk.
So what does this term junk refer to? So there are a number of credit ratings agencies, and the best known ones globally are S&P, Fitch, and Moody's. You might have heard these names being thrown about. And the jobs of these companies really are to assess the credit worthiness of certain investments. Most often those investments are fixed interest or bond type investments. So they come in many different forms. They are sovereign bonds or government bonds. So these are debt instruments issued by governments around the world. But then you also get corporate bonds, so companies around the world issuing debt instruments for investors to invest in. And then you even get financial instruments. Now we don't invest in those sort of things, but there are structured products that are put together and so on. And these ratings agencies assess each of these investment opportunities and say, what is the likelihood that the particular issuer, whether it's the government, the company, or the bank, what is the likelihood that they will not be able to repay that debt to you?
So can I just jump in here?
Sure.
So remember, as individuals, we also get credit scores.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, you know, in Financial Freedom University and through other programs, one of the key things that I get you to do is get your own credit rating. This is your credit report. So essentially, it's just telling the world, so each of us have it, each of you have got a file out there telling the world, are you a financial risk?
That's exactly the right term.
Are you worth lending to, and what's the probability of you repaying? Are you going to be a bit dodgy and a bit sloppy on this? Are you going to likely not pay back at all? Or are you going to be like, ooh, real nerdy? And on that side. So this is what we're talking about.
It's exactly what it is. These are countries' credit worthiness, their credit scores, as Anne so rightly puts it. So I think what this really means is the likes of S&P, Fitch, and Moody's would look at the balance sheet, the income statement, the budget of a country, and look at that and say, do they actually have enough money left over or available to pay the interest on the debt that they have? And so you have a whole number of categories which are referred to as investment grade, and that's really just a category of ratings that says, you know what, if you invest in a country or in a debt instrument with investment grade, you've got a very good probability that you will be getting your money back. And then you reach a certain point where if it drops below that level, officially it is referred to as sub-investment grade. And that is the category where this horrible term junk has been allocated to.
So we're going to call it sub-investment grade from now
because
on.
That's really what it is. And all that it says is there are certain types of investors that is either not allowed to invest in it or would prefer not to. And most often that would relate to pension fund money, retirement savings, long-term money that says, you know what, we can't afford to take this risk of this debt not being repaid.
In their terms,
in their mandate,
that they're not allowed to.
Exactly.
So with that in mind, you know, from South Africa now, South Africa having this rating, the sub-investment grade, what is the likely impact on the investments in South Africa and things like, obviously we're specifically interested in our trackers.
Yes.
What could be the impact on the value of those, given that there is like especially foreign investment and the large pension funds not necessarily being allowed to now invest in.
So Anne, the most direct impact is really on your bond market. So in the investors coming to buy the government bonds in particular. And at the moment, we haven't really seen all that much of an impact on the bond market. And that is because we have not received a full downgrade to sub-investment grade. We've received bits and pieces of sub-investment grade rating, but at the moment, we still have a window of opportunity. There is still a chance
I'm
for
a big
the
believer
powers
in
that be. But I think what is so important in this is I almost want to say I want government to take the downgrades that we've had seen so far. They've got to take it very seriously, and they have to try and do whatever is possible to avoid that next step of the downgrade. For us as ordinary people, we need to take it a lot less seriously, because I think there's been a lot of sensationalist commentary around what does this mean? And I've heard people go back to the late 1990s and how our family lost our house when interest rates went to 25%. And so a lot of emotional messaging around what this means. What is true is that when you are in a sub-investment grade category, investors will still invest in your bonds, but they will expect to be compensated for it. So they're going to say, please pay me a higher interest rate before I lend you the money.
For the country is going to be more expensive.
Exactly. Exactly.
How is that likely to... So let's separate out those people living in South Africa and how could that affect the cost of living,
yes,
interest and inflation.
Exactly.
And then the investing in South African-based assets.
Okay, right. So let's first take the person living in South Africa. So you're quite right. It's going to cost the government more or they're going to spend more money on interest, and that means they've got less money available to spend on social grants, on infrastructure investing, on really investing into the economy to improve our economy. So it is a longer-term negative picture from that perspective. Okay. There's also the immediate impact in terms of potential currency weakness. Now, currency weakness typically translates into higher inflation, which of course is bad for each and every one of us, but it also has an input through into interest rates. Prior to the downgrade, we were expecting that we might be seeing short-term interest rate decreases in South Africa. That's pretty much off the table, and there's even the chance that if this becomes a fully fledged downgrade, we will even see interest rate increases. And that's where it's going to start affect you and me, and in terms of how we live our lives. So the focus on what the impact is for us, we shouldn't be concerned about what's happening in terms of government finances. We can only be concerned about what it means in my personal pocket and how can I deal with that.
So I would love to come back to this raising interest rates and how we deal with that in our financial planning, because interest rates are rising now in the US. It's very likely that they're going to start rising in the UK, possibly Australia as well, although there's a lot of political pressure to keep them low. And so we'll have a little bit of a discussion on rising interest rates. So just coming back to so that's the living side.
Yes.
Now what about the investing in Lighten-based assets?
So these two components, and I know I want us to talk in quite a bit more detail around currency implication. Again, because this is a global thing, this is not just about South Africa. But if we were to look specifically just at the investment in South African assets, when we look at our equity market, our shares, so buying shares on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, many of our South African companies have actually globalized, externalized their earnings base. I like to use the analogy that the spotlight that the JSE shines on the South African economy is quite a narrow spotlight, and it's quite a skew one as well. What do I mean with that? It's a narrow spotlight because there's a lot of things that happen in the South African economy that is not reflected in the stock market.
And in fact, companies.
Exactly. And in fact, a lot of the bad and the negative stuff that we're seeing actually is not captured in our stock exchange. But it's also a very skew one because so many of our companies have now got operations in the rest of the world, in Africa, in Europe, in the States, literally globally. What you're capturing through an investment in the JSE is a global investment. It is not just about South Africa.
So, for example, one of the, funds that a lot of people like, the Satrix Indy, which is just, keep performing fantastically. That's predominantly because most of those companies are global companies, Naspers, SAB Miller, there's beers to every corner of the universe. Richmond, the luxury goods sites in that index tracker.
Yeah.
So actually the exposure is mostly 80%
offshore,
out of
South. And the interesting thing is that you now have this relationship that when the rand depreciates, when the currency depreciates, for a South African investor, the investments in the JSE tend to go up because of the depreciating currency. So you've got this dichotomy of this environment that feels like it's falling apart, and then you look at your investments on the JSE and it's like, oh wow, but they're up. Why are they up?
Okay.
And it is because of this currency impact for investors in South Africa, courtesy of our South African companies who've really globalized and said, you know what, there's a big world out there. The company is not just going to operate in South Africa.
So if I'm just hearing you correctly, and just sort of my good old layman's wealth chef slang, where it cut through, essentially saying, you still want to have your I see Heidi is referred here to the Poiki course, to that recipe with your different index trackers covering your diversity.
Absolutely.
But this is not saying now South Africa is like, oh, no longer invest in South Africa. In fact, there's a great opportunity, and this is about understanding why we recommend this core market. So I think maybe this would be a good segue into the currency thing, as Nerina's mentioned it.
Yeah.
But actually, what you need to be aware of is making sure you do have offshore exposure and understanding that actually the majority of the assets or the companies that are listed on the Johannesburg stock market are not going to be impacted, except possibly longer term borrowing, but they also have their own ratings.
Yes.
So they're borrowing affected by a different credit score, like your and my credit score.
Yes.
So actually, business as usual.
Pretty much. So I think what we're looking at here is that it's so important to make sure that the majority of your investments is not just in the country, but more specifically in the currency of your liabilities, of your expenses, where you've got to spend your money.
Okay, so before you say, so I've got a question on this, which I think really gives a great example of what we're talking about here. So Sue Lachlan sent in a question, and she said, we're UK expats living in Israel, and we invested in the FTSE 100, and we see in the UK the FTSE 100 in 2016 had an extraordinary year. It had a close on 19% capital value growth, and then with a dividend reinvestment, and you all know you've got to reinvest your dividend investment returns, one of those 7 key principles that we cover in
successful investors. Indeed.
Absolutely. With that, in 2016, the FTSE 100 was close on a 26% return. Pretty good in the year. If you were invested in it in pounds.
Yeah.
So Sue said, why am I seeing this return from the UK? But when I look at my portfolio, I'm seeing it flatlined or, a growth of maybe 2-3%. So this is exactly what Nerina started to talk about, is currency risk.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what happened to Sue was she's invested in an asset that actually, yes, did grow in value, but the currency, the pound, thanks to we didn't even have to have a president like us to Brexit.
Yeah.
The pound devalued, so the net effect, the FTSE went up, but because of the currency devalued, almost by the same amount by how the market went up.
Exactly.
So that's why it ended up as close to a zero line. So here's the key thing, is exactly what Nerina's going to talk about now, is why you've got to be aware of this and why we say core market.
Exactly. So the pound effectively depreciated by about 25% in 2016. So there's your 26% rise on your FTSE tracker, and the 25% depreciation of the pound means that if you were not a UK-based investor, if like you were sitting in Israel or anywhere else in the world, you effectively didn't really see much of a change in your investment. But now let's think of the UK investor. So the UK investor is extremely happy about the 26% return that they received in their core market, their home market, as it should be. But bear in mind what happened. Because that pound depreciated, things are more expensive in the UK. Your inflation is higher because anything that is imported now has to be paid for with a weaker pound. So this increase in value in your core investment is there to compensate you for the increase in costs that you have in living expenses in the UK. And that's what I mean when I talk about having the matching between where your investments, the currency and the market in which you do your investments, and where you expect to have your living expenses or your liabilities, where you've got to pay for your mortgage or where you've got to pay for your for living expenses. And that's what we are focusing on here. So following on from that immediately is when you invest in a market outside of your home market, which is very important, and we certainly encourage it, and it's a strong component of a well-diversified portfolio, be clear about why you are doing it. You are not doing it to try and capitalize on currency movements. That is the wrong reason to be doing it. You are doing it so that you can diversify into markets, into industries, into companies that you don't have in your home market, in your domestic market. We are looking for that diversified potjie course, as Heidi was referring to. Exactly.
Not as a currency hedge.
Exactly. It's not a hedge. So it's good to have the diversification in the currencies, but you're not trying to get a certain trend, in other words, get better performance because of the currency. You are just after the diversification. So when you are assessing your investments, be very sure about where's my home market, what currency is the majority of my liabilities or my expenses, and make sure that your asset base, your investments, is closely aligned with that. That is how we manage risk in a very volatile and uncertain environment.
And we, often Nerina and I and Elsa on other tradings where we speak about this word risk, which I think is such a misunderstood thing. The reality is life is full of risk. Waking up in the morning is a risky thing to do. And life is pretty risky because you're pretty guaranteed that it's going to end. So it's 100%, fatal risk, just the thing we're in. But I think the challenge is a lot of this word risk is used in the media and side, and investing in the stock market's risky. But what we're talking about, and this is where we often say, I love that Nerina used this word volatility. We're talking about volatility just means ups and downs, up and down. It's just the roller coaster of life. Mm-hmm. And so what we've mentioned is there's the roller coaster called the stock market price. So when Putin farts, I don't know, Brazil has a little blip. But those are the blips. And then there is this ups and downs of the currency. And so, if anyone's sitting here, so thanks, so Sheila's saying, thanks for putting that in plain English. And again, I just want to I'm just getting a sense that just to reiterate, don't get into analysis paralysis. Mm-hmm. the whole reason why in PIMS and elsewhere we help you to see how to put a simple portfolio of 4 or 5 index trackers, it is designed to give you this core market aspect. But now hopefully you're getting a bit of a deeper understanding as to this core market. Gives you that exposure. It's often cheaper to invest in your own domestic market. It's more accessible from an administrative side, you also can get your benefits from tax savings, pensions, ISAs, tax-free savings account, Roths, whatever it is in your local currency. That's why you're going to be doing your investing through a local market. But then it gives you this matching of your expenses to your investment. So you effectively nullify. And then just to be aware that the other parts of your recipe, which are other markets, outside of it, are going to have this aspect of currency risk. But to also, again, whether it's the political volatility or whether it's currency volatility, again, to breathe out. In 2017, what have we seen? The pound started to strengthen again. And, in time, it all comes out in the wash.
Absolutely.
And it's about that longer term side. So just keeping, balanced on that. So I think we've sort of covered currency and, Cassandra, Heidi had a question here. She says, Nerina, you've got your poiki, your recipe. So saying, has essentially that balanced portfolio that we recommend in FU and in PIMS, that essentially of a core market, we won't be able to go Heidi into the absolute details, but I guess the key question is saying, have we changed any recommendations on how we would put that portfolio together? So
no. You know what, Anna, Heidi, thank you for asking the question, because I think so often when we have all this noise around us, we think that it means that we need to act. And more often than not, we don't. So I love sort of making the statement to say, let your investment strategy be determined by the headlines in your life, not the headlines in the media. And what I mean with that is, when do you change your investment strategy? When something changes in your life, not when something changes in the environment around us. Because if you are doing it because of changes in the environment, then you are mostly going to be reactive to things that actually don't need changing, and that often is one of the biggest value destroyers. Because you are reacting after the fact, you often then sell low and then you go and buy high again. Whereas if you stick to the long-term strategy of the well-diversified portfolio, as we do in PIMS, as we taught it with a Potjie course recipe and so on, those are designed really as long-term well-diversified portfolios to give you access and exposure to the range of assets that you require to build assets over the long term. You are looking for a combination of things that have got capital growth potential, looking for things with a variety of different income components, whether they are on the basis of interest or dividends or even the coupons of bonds that are paid to you. There's diversification in the sources of return that you get, and if you are exposed to the right assets in the long term, it all comes out in the wash. It really is a case of, ultimately, when you then sit down with that feast, you've got a nutritious, well-diversified meal, even though during the time of building up that asset base, there might have been times that you looked inside your pot and said, that doesn't look quite so appetizing.
That meat's pretty tough.
Exactly. But having it in there serves a purpose, so that at the end, when you actually reach the point of feasting on your investments, you know that you've got all your bases covered. So no, we haven't changed those strategic allocations, and that's the way that one sticks with a well thought out, well constructed investment strategy.
Yeah, what a great question. Thanks, Heidi, because absolutely. And here's where just some real compassion and forgiveness. I've been in this for quite a while. God, not giving my age away, but I've been a stock market investor for well over 20 years now. And I'll be completely honest, I get these sort of things, and my sphincters start doing this, and I jump in and go, should I be looking at something? And I have to remind myself that that's just an echo. That's just a response to just a lot of the energy of the media around us, that it's actually not even my own truth. It's just it's just a reaction because so many people are unconsciously reacting. Mm-hmm. And, we've obviously got some nautical theme going on, but I just love this. And I think maybe we need to make a poster. Let your investment strategy be defined by the headlines of your life. Mm-hmm. And just this last weekend over Easter, I've decided I want to go sailing. For a nice chunk. I've always had this as a bit of a dream and went, time for a bit of adventure. So I've been looking at monohulls and cats and deciding, what boat, if I'm going to go for a year, 2 years, 5 years, God knows how long, who knows, but I want to head off. What would be the right vessel? And it's been such an interesting experience looking at going, well, where do I intend sailing? Where would I be? Do I want to be going through the Northern Passage or down Cape Horn and through, ice and stuff? Or am I going to stick to what we called like the trade wind routes where it's easy cruising? What is that I'm wanting to see and do? And then designing the boat accordingly rather than going, let me search through the internet and look at what's the popular one or what's exciting right now or who's got better marketing. Then the next, and going, so choosing my vessel. And remember, these vehicles, your investments are they are like this thing, this yacht, your vehicle that are taking you through life and designing accordingly. So I love that. Headlines of your life.
But on the nautical theme, I remember when we did a similar thing around the election of Trump and the same sort of angst and chaos and should I do something? And I then also shared the analogy of how do you deal with feeling seasick? Because I think for a lot of people then and now again, you actually feel quite nauseous about what's happening around us.
Because remember I'm going to come back to this because I want you to come back because right now I just want to, all of you in the UK, you've just had another election thrown on you for our amazing US friends. You as well, every day you're hitting another swirling wave. Remind us, how do we?
So I think at the time what we said was when you are on a boat and you are, especially when it hits turbulent waters and you feel nauseous and seasick, what are the two things that you are told to do? The first thing is get outside, get some fresh air on your face. Breathe, really just sort of feel that actually being stuck inside and cocooning yourself and battening down the hatches is not the way to go. Get out there, expose yourself to the fresh air and the wind, and that's good. But more importantly, look towards the horizon, look far into the future. Don't look down at what's happening in terms of the turbulent waters below you, because that's what makes you nauseous. If you look at the horizon, you actually see that things are smooth and plain sailing over there. And you also get a better breeze on your face when you're looking far anyway. So I want us to remember how anxious we felt with Brexit last year, how anxious we felt when Trump was elected in November. And we are now experiencing much of that same. And we're going to have it again.
We felt in 2008 when the commodity prices and the subprime credit issue went over the cliff. How anxious I felt at the end of the 90s when we had the dot-com bubble burst. We had the collapse of the Asian tigers. We had the entire Far Eastern economies and Southeast Asia, which had this boom period, absolutely collapse. And now we look again at your Singapores, your Malaysias. So it's so whilst, as they say, history is not a determinant of future, I think it's also important to remember perspective. That we are resilient. Yes, there are tumultuous times, but the bottom line is that the most important thing is to wake up every day and going, am I having fun? Am I doing stuff I enjoy? And am I giving money great direction? So we're going to come back to that, but I just want to touch on interest rates.
Yes, very important. So what is something that we do need to pay attention to? So as Anne had alluded to earlier, rising interest rates is now much of a global phenomenon. There's not a lot of places in the world where interest rates will remain low for the foreseeable future. And that has much more of an impact on our budgets, on our cash flow than it has on our investments. So this is incredibly important for us to go back to our budgets again and say, what does my debt position look like? How much money am I spending on unnecessary wants versus things that I really need? So if there is anything that you want to do, if you really still, after everything that we've said, feel compelled to actually do something about all this noise, go back to your budget and have a good look at your budget and say, where am I most exposed to increasing interest rates? And that will be if you have debt, and look at where you are spending unnecessary things. Make sure you've got that emergency fund in place. It is going to be the stabilizer that will help you weather the storms as and when they come. And very importantly, make sure that you don't spend, like our government now will have to do, spend too much money on just paying interest to someone else when that money can be in your life, ensuring that you do have that fun that we all want to have every single day.
Yeah, I mean, just such great advice. And, I think this is what's so great when we have shakeups. Mm-hmm. Often we look back, and I know some of the big shakeups in my own life, maybe they've been health things, maybe they've been moved countries, whatever they are. Sometimes at the time they can feel really tumultuous. Mm. But I know, and I've shared this with a lot of FFUers, and these are great times to strip away and simplify. Mm. So one of the fantastic things that these things can do when we're starting to feel anxious is the greatest thing we can do is lighten our load. Yeah. And when I'm starting a new chapter, I'm wanting to start another new big investment thing, maybe a new business, I always go, how can I lighten my load to make my probability of success greater? Because if you're going to start a great big journey, when I did Kilimanjaro almost a year ago, or elsewhere, you go, where can I put down unnecessarily baggage? Where have I taken on financial baggage, financial loads that actually aren't serving me? Mm-hmm. So when there's tumultuous time here, actually, it's such an amazing opportunity to go, to reevaluate what's important to you, to go, wow, to realize that actually we live in the world by its nature is uncertain. It's got polarities. We're going to be swinging. So it gives a great opportunity for us to come back into our own, what I always call this money leadership. Mm-hmm. And this real leadership to go, wow, what a fantastic opportunity for me to get really clear on what is important to me and to my family and those I care about and my environment, and coming back to almost these core values, and then go, let's dust those off and let's go, it's my money management. So Nerina, it's budget, and I want to extend it to this. This is your whole management of your money, how it comes in your life, where you direct it, are you investing? Getting clean again. Yeah, such a great decluttering time. Yeah. And so thanks for bringing that up, Nerina, because this is actually the thing to be doing now.
Absolutely. And to focus on the things that's also within your control. Bear in mind that most of the noise that you hear around you is not within any of our control. We can't change any of it. But what we can do is to look at what we can control, and that is your money management. It's also about the consistency with which you stick to your investment strategy.
Yes.
So the whole idea, Anne spoke about risk as in volatility, the up and down of the market. Having a consistent monthly recurring investment going off that you don't have to think about, it just happens in the background, is incredibly important in a time like this, because you're going to be buying some of your investments at higher prices and other investments at lower prices. And over the long term of your investment journey, you will find that so-called dollar cost averaging or cost averaging really serves you well. And to try and time things and say, oh, I'm just going to hold off until things get better. You know what? Newsflash, it ain't going to get better. It's going to remain volatile. It's going to remain uncertain. It's going to remain what we've seen, not just in the last day, week, month, year, decade. That is the reality of life as we know it. So let's put strategies in place that help us deal with that uncertainty. And certainly a consistent, regular investment strategy is one of the best ways to deal with such uncertainty.
Well, I just think that is just such, great advice. And to remember, at the end of the day, you want your investments and your money serving you.
Yeah.
Remember, you don't want the tail wagging the dog. Come back to, let your investment strategy be defined by the headlines of your life. Get clear about what are those headlines? What juices you? What do you want to do? Yeah. Where can you strip away unnecessary crap that has bogged you down? Where can you jetson some of that, ballast, so that you can lighten it up, so that you're not having to carry a lot of load, that then actually frees you up? What can you do to get that emergency fund in place, to get that nest egg, to get that regular investment going? Put it on that autopilot. So at the end of the day, which is what we are both about, is making sure that you are actually experiencing a joyful, amazing life.
Absolutely. Couldn't have put it better myself.
So if there are any questions that you want us to cover that we haven't covered specifically, you can just quickly type them in. Otherwise, we'll look at starting to wrap up. But it's just been so great having you here. And, Nerina and I are going to be looking at doing a little bit more of these, and also give a heads up, we're going to be opening a new page and really focusing more on just stocks for frocks. So be on the lookout for that. And and if you enjoyed this format for Q&A, let us know.
Yeah, and even if we can't address all the questions that you asked today in this session, we can certainly do more of these in future. And it's always nice to see what your questions, what the burning issues are, because that also guides us in terms of what do we offer via Facebook Live? What do we put into a blog? What do we actually write about? What do we talk about? So thank you for sharing your concerns and your questions with us. And stick with us. We will answer your questions in due course.
Oh, and thank you, Catherine and Liz and Simi and Heidi and Cassandra for all your wonderful comments, and
Sure.
Sheila and Monique.
Wow.
Yeah, this is about all of us claiming our freedom and taking back our power, because I think one of the things that can happen in a lot of this tumultuous time around the politics going on, Theresa May and Donald Trump and them romping off into the sunset, holding hands and whatever else, I'm being a bit facetious now. But we can sometimes feel powerless.
Yeah.
And so much of what we're talking about by financial empowerment and by the skills that you're learning and doing here is about remembering that you are in the driving seat, that you actually do have far more power than maybe sometimes we can believe. And so I do see we've got one little question coming in here from Cheryl, so lovely, Jen, Annie, Liz, Simi. Okay,
we really have a wonderful community of people.
So should we worry about Zoomer, etc., threat to take over our property? Sheila said.
Yeah. You know what? Again, worry is pretty much a useless emotion. It doesn't serve you. It doesn't help anything. Should one be? Is that a reality? Is that something that can happen? You know what? A nuclear bomb could fall outside any minute. Yes, it can happen. I'm not going to say it never will happen. The likelihood of it happening, well, you know what? We still have a very strong judicial system. We have an incredibly strong civil society in South Africa. We've seen the evidence of it in recent weeks, the fight back of ordinary people. So worry is not going to help us anything, but what will help you is to stand up, to make your voice heard, to make sure that you support organizations that, should there be a real threat of something like this, that they can be fought. So find the way that you feel that you can take that power back, express your concerns, and contribute to actually stop it or make sure that it doesn't happen. And there are many forums, whether that is just adding your voice, whether it is adding money to a legal battle, whatever the case might be. Take back your power of actually making a difference. And I think that we know we've got in our power. The likelihood of it happening, I know that there's a lot of noise about it. We also need to differentiate between the populist talk of what the vast majority of relatively uneducated voters want to hear, and certainly things like land grab and things like radical economic transformation and even white monopoly capital. Those are terms that are quite emotive and really sort of talk to a populist vote without much substance to it. Remember, we are in an election year in terms of the ANC election. So expect more of this. Don't be surprised if we hear more of this. Does that mean that it necessarily translates into reality? I don't believe so. Just earlier this morning, again, I saw confirmation that land grab or land reform without compensation is not ANC policy. So try to look beyond the populist rhetoric and focus on what is probable and what will happen, and where you feel you need to take a stand. Absolutely do that. Take your power back and make your voice heard.
And, as the lovely quote goes, trust in Allah, but tie up your camel. And tying up your camel is ensuring you've got a diversified portfolio. Yeah. I know we sound like stuck records, but it really is sometimes as simple as that. Make sure that you've got an equity portfolio that is invested in so and now we're going into a slightly wider thing, but this is about asset classes. So we've got diversification in terms of equity, but you want to make sure you've got asset allocation, diversified asset allocation outside of different asset classes. So if, whether you're in the UK, Timbuktu, out of Mongolia, Winnipeg in Canada,
or London,
or in Melbourne, where I've just come from, and I'm flying to New York tonight. Yeah, crazy. Like my poor body doesn't know where it is. If you've got all of your investments in one asset class, you're putting yourself at risk. Mm-hmm. That can be from crazy political talk or to subprime crisis in the UK or to any reason. So this is why we also say, there's a property asset class, mm-hmm. and also differentiate from your investments versus the things that serve you from your emotional financial stability, which might be your home. Mm-hmm. So differentiate from those sides. And if you really are uncomfortable about a certain asset class, if property is feeling very uncomfortable for you, remember you can have property exposure through your stock market investments,
your index trackers,
through your property index tracker from your real estate investment trust that gives you great property investment in industrial, commercial, retail property, where classically most of the talk of any kind of property distribution tends to be more residential or farming land. So those are the ways, Sheila, you can safeguard and then go, again, what do? Breathe and get on with life. Indeed. So great question on that. Great. We've got Una saying you halfway through the PIMS training. It's awesome. I'm just seeing if there's any other questions here. Wonderful whiff of wisdom. Great, Kate. Cheryl. Well, Nerina, I think from me, we've had a great session. So thank you for joining us here on this Q&A. And to just really go from here, my big takeaway is my investment strategy is defined by my life headlines, not by the media's. In fact, stop looking at those. And your real big takeaway is business as usual. Be aware of where it might impact. Things like inflation and how that is always a great opportunity for us to strip away, get to the essential, become great money managers and great money leadership, which is about conscious spending, lightening our loads, and far less about worrying about what fund we're in or currency, but sticking to what we know and trusting that core. So we come back to that centered point, because that's, I think, maybe the third point is when we breathe, we get that fresh air, we look in the distance, but coming back to inside and trust that we've got this handled. Yeah. So those are my takeaways. What are yours?
I think my parting thoughts for you would also be, don't knock yourself about the fact that you are concerned about what's happening in the world. Don't feel bad. As much as we say business as usual, don't panic. That doesn't mean that the emotion that you're feeling are not valid and not real. It's absolutely valid and real. It's all about what do you do about that emotion? How do you deal with it? And what we're saying, sounds like a wonderful idea. I think what we're really saying here is identify what is appropriate reaction. And a lot, I think, of what one feels initially is quite inappropriate in terms of your reaction. So create that space for yourself through breathing and by saying, you know what, maybe I don't have to react to this just yet. And you know what, ultimately, if you find that it's really hard for you to deal emotionally with the noise around you, switch it off. Put on nice music, go outside, take a walk, watch a movie, cook a meal for your loved ones. Do what does
have
make
some
you
great
feel
sex.
Okay. The point really being that focus your energy on what serves you. And if you know that you've got a well-defined long-term investment strategy that's running on autopilot, don't stress and panic and worry about what's happening around you. That's my key message for you really to take with you. Thank you for sharing the time with us. Thank you for opening yourselves up, I think, to ask these questions and to allow us to maybe, hopefully, give you some reassurance.
From us,
bye.
Cheers for now. Bye.